Good morning. Welcome to the show. Is this Shana?
It is. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Okay, tell me if I'm saying your name correctly. We're live on the air. Is it Shana Trahan? Trahan? How do you say your name?
Sure, it's Shana Trahan.
Shana Trahan. Okay, cool. Got it. Thank you. Thank you for joining us this morning. Very interested in talking to you. Can you, before we talk about your book, can you tell us about your background and about the therapy center and everything, anything and everything we should know about you before we really get into it?
Okay, well, I appreciate you very much, for sure. So I was born and raised in Louisiana, right near New Orleans, and then also, so my life pretty much is, I was an educator for 20 years. I was in military leadership, parent of 2 beautiful kids, 1 beautiful granddaughter, and I love to travel. Insofar as mental health is concerned, I kind of thought about it, I guess, when I was younger, because people used to always come to me and ask me, what do I think? And so, so that's a little bit of background.
So, and tell us about the Trahan Therapy Center. What is that exactly? What do you do there?
Thank you so much. So the Trahan Therapy Center is where we shape minds and change lives. And that's a slogan I came up with because I just thought about the processes that I saw taking place in the transformations of people's lives who followed through consistently and were intentional about the therapeutic process. So that's what we do. And been in private practice for almost 8 years.
Okay.
And right now we're licensed in like 8 states. And so we started out of Texas, though. And so that's, we really, we love to support people who are having mental health challenges, if it's with marriage, if it's emotional, just, anything that they're dealing with. I try to streamline it. So I would say if I wanted to tell you mainly what we do,
sure,
it's going to be relationship, marriage, certainly anxiety, depression, and had a lot of clients who've presented with like bipolar disorder.
Okay.
But certainly the age range pretty much is like 12 and up. Okay.
In your experience, do you feel like has it gotten better over time in terms of the stigma? A lot of people have a problem admitting or acknowledging and directly dealing with mental health issues like depression, for example. I know this from personal experience. I'm someone who struggles with depression. As a lot of our listeners know, I've been pretty open about it the last few years, but I wasn't always open about it. And there was a time where I would try to hide it. And I know that there can be a lot of stigma and judgment that people have to deal with if they start to open up about these things, whether it be publicly or even to family and friends. But I do feel like that's gotten a lot better, especially over the past decade. I feel like people have become more open and comfortable talking about these things. And I'm curious what your experience in terms of that has been. Do you think it's gotten better or maybe it's gotten worse or I don't know. I mean, what do you think in terms of people being open about this stuff?
That's an excellent question because there's multiple parts to that. So the first part I will share is that I do believe that more doors and more windows have been opened. And honestly, as people in Hollywood have come out to say, hey, you know what, I'm experiencing anxiety, I'm experiencing depression, I do have bipolar, and I do movies as well, right? So I believe that has created some shift. And then also, though, literally I was talking to someone the other day and, someone that I know that's not in therapy. And I asked them, I said, well, have you ever thought about talking to someone? And they said, well, I just think of talking to someone as just, saying just what I'm feeling. And I said, well, therapy is so much more than that, right? And, please don't come just pour everything on my head and walk away.
Right.
For me, therapy is certainly about change, and I'm such a solution-focused type person. But because of my background, I've taught from babies. I used to have a daycare, so from babies all the way to college level, I've taught. And I would say that I've worked with people who have identified special needs and then those who don't have identified special needs, right? And so in working with those with identified special needs, I think that that really has helped me to be real specific in planning and treatment planning for my clients,
Hmm.
because they don't, just to give them a broad spectrum antibiotic, for example, is just not enough. Like, they need something that's really specific to their background and their experiences. So I practice what's called integrative therapy, and that is it uses um, multiple theories in one setting, as opposed to trying to go with one theory, but the person really needs a little bit of this one and a little bit of that one.
Hmm.
And so I believe that that is the most, for me, the best approach.
Okay.
And it seems to have worked for the people that I see. But yeah, just to answer your question, yes, I think that it's more people are open. However, there's still so many people, as we look at the number of people committing suicide, there's still
Hmm.
so many more people that need to be reached.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. So tell us about the book, The Anxiety Fix.
Thank you so much. Anxiety fix. Wow. Yeah. Just as I was observing, I guess, what's been happening, and I don't watch the news much, but I guess back last year I was watching it a little more, and I was just listening to even clients and friends and family members, and it just dawned on me that people were really suffering from anxiety.
Hmm.
I mean, almost to what could be like nearly OCD levels, and it's unfortunate because there's ways and systems and processes and there's so many solutions.
Sure.
And so I came up with Anxiety Fix, and I believe that all of the components of it are so important. And so the book talks about like the biology of anxiety, which I think that it's important to understand, like, where is this coming from, right? What's the source of all this?
Hmm.
And then the next thing, certainly, we look at food that you eat,
Hmm.
and then the best foods for, that you should eat if you're having anxiety. And like everything, a lot of times we overlook it. I mean, food and water are like the foundational, it's foundational like our cells, right?
Hmm.
So what foods are contributing to how we're feeling, and how we're feeling is presenting into the world.
Hmm.
Also, we look at things such as community, building community. When I talk to a lot of people, I find that they don't have, their core group,
Yeah.
because families kind of spread out, and they move to different states, and then it's like now you have to come up with your own group. And so I believe that certainly finding your people is a thing that, people have said to use the term your people, but it's meaning that group that fits you, right?
Yeah.
So in finding your people, that part is really important to reducing anxiety, because you feel like, hey, I'm not alone. And also looking at holistic supports, because it's not, everyone doesn't necessarily need a medicine from the pharmacy, but sometimes people can definitely benefit. So let me say that. But
Sure.
also looking at holistic supports for that purpose, and I think that understanding what those things are is important. And if those things work for you, then you may not need medication. However, if you're a person suffering with severe anxiety or severe depression, or severe case of your your mental health concern, you may need the medication. So I mean, just have to be honest with yourself, right? So if the holistic supports are not working for you, then we may have to move towards medication.
It sounds like you're suggesting too that tell me if I'm understanding this correctly, that it's probably better to try to with something like anxiety. It's better to try to address it, holistically, or you mentioned nutrition, the importance of nutrition, and most people don't exercise enough. Obviously, that I'm a hypnotherapist, and I talk to my clients a lot about that mind body connection, and I tell them, look, the better you feel mentally, the better you'll feel physically, and vice versa. But it sounds like you really suggest kind of trying these other things before, because I think there's a misconception that some people have that you can cure anything with a pill, but the reality is there's other things that you do want to try first because you might not need medication. And if you can address these things with diet and exercise and, you talked about community, because a lot of people struggle with loneliness, and that obviously that does inflate anxiety and depression and all these things. So, I mean, it sounds like you're saying there are ways to address these things, and medication might be, I don't know if the last resort is the right way of putting it, but am I on the right track with that?
You are so on the right track as we watch these lovely commercials that pass on the different stations, and then at the end somebody says about 40 different side effects very fast.
Yep.
Everybody's in the business of medicine and or the line of work that we're in for different reasons, right? We all have our different reasons, and I would say that my motive, if you will, has always been to help and support.
Yeah.
And so that's my military background, that's my teaching background, that's my even store manager background, that's my daycare background. Everything I've always done has been to support and train, teach, help, and so that for me is this thing as well, because I could say, hey, go get the meds, because it doesn't hurt me physically, but it's just a moral part, like just knowing that, hey, maybe if they had done, a little more exercise, or maybe kind of gotten, went out and, developed a new hobby and, met some new people, that could have been the beginning to something new and better for them. You don't go just straight to the pill or straight to the medicine that has, a lot of side effects.
Yeah.
But again, some people certainly are benefited by that, right? So we don't want to say that medicine is not good, because medicine certainly has helped many people for a lot of things, but certainly we want to think it in terms of medication, how you kind of titrate up or titrate down. So we want to kind of start at the basic level. Hey, how much water are you drinking, right? And then go up to medication if that is required.
Sure. I do. Yeah, most people don't drink enough water, and it is so important, especially in the hot summer. But it's always important, and it's interesting too, because I know that there's studies that show that exercise, for example, for many people, and again, obviously we don't want to say for everybody, but for many people, just exercise, even just walking every day, can be more effective for depression, for dealing with depression, than say going on a medication. And you're right too. You mentioned those commercials that you see for medications, and I don't remember which one it was, but there's an antidepressant. Years ago, I remember seeing this commercial late at night on a cable news channel. I think I know which one it was, but I'm not sure, so I don't want to say it. But one of the side effects for this antidepressant may cause suicidal ideations. And,
correct.
And as someone who struggles with depression,
correct.
I remember seeing this commercial, and it mentions the suicidal ideations, and I thought, well, that's a bit counterintuitive. If I'm going to go on that med, it's because I'm trying not to kill myself. That this antidepressant might make me want to kill myself. So to be very blunt. So yeah. So I'm always skeptical. I've never gone on any kind of medication for my depression, but maybe I should. But so some would suggest I should try it. I try to deal with it on my own, but I do know that and again, it's something that a lot of people struggle with. Depression is very very common, and anxiety, of course. And they're
I agree.
They tend to be connected. Do you feel that people are being, well, let me ask it this way. Do you think these problems have become more widespread, or do you think people are just becoming more aware and open about discussing them over time? We talked earlier about the stigma, and I think you and I agree that that's been getting better. But do you think these problems have actually gotten worse, or do you think people are just more open about them? Or maybe it's hard to say.
I think that people are becoming a little more aware,
Yeah.
but honestly, the crazy thing is that I would say sometimes, unfortunately, people are unaware of. Some people are unaware of, you know, our own presentation.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking to a friend the other day, and I mentioned something to them about, um, I guess, a behavior, I observed, not trying to be their therapist, but it's just that
Yeah.
we were talking about something between us. And I said, did you realize X, had happened? And they were like, oh, maybe because of Y, and I said, no, it wasn't, Y wasn't present at the time, and then, cause they were showing like little signs of anger or frustration, and like there was nothing in the moment really that anybody else probably would have, you said, hey, there, you should be frustrated, you should be angry right now, right?
Yeah.
And so they hadn't even realized that presentation of themselves.
Okay.
And so sometimes we don't even realize our own presentations. So how can we even, talk to the therapist and say, hey, I've been experiencing X, and with everybody ghosting everybody in 2025. I mean, people aren't being on, aren't really talking to their friends, and they just, oh, that person presented angry. I'm just going to leave them alone forever. So you just,
Sure.
people, how do we have friendships? How can we be honest with each other and not, concern ourselves with everybody ghosting us or, whatever. So yeah, sometimes we don't even realize our own presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's easy to not only do we not always recognize our own presentation, but it's easy to misread other people. Text messaging, I think, has played a big role in that in our society. In that, I saw somebody make a joke the other day. It's almost like you have to end every text with a smiley emoji, or the person you're sending the text to is automatically going to assume that you're angry with them.
Oh, right.
There's a lot of misunderstandings that happen because of that. And I'm guilty of it myself. Sometimes I misread people or I misunderstand, or especially if I meet somebody new and they come across to me as a little bit curt or perhaps kind of stern in how they present, and then I get into my own head about, oh, they don't like me. There's something about me that bothers them, and then I get to know them a little bit, and it's like, oh no, that's just how they talk. They're a nice person, and they do seem to like me. They just I misunderstood. I misread them. And that happens to me a lot. I've gotten better about it over the years, but it still happens where it's like, I get a wrong idea, a wrong impression about somebody else's presentation. So it's something I think we all need to be aware of and mindful of. And, but it's tricky, I do wonder if some of these problems have worsened over time though, too. I mean, obviously, like you said, people are more open about talking about these things, and there's more awareness. But also, I think that because you mentioned how people eat the foods that we eat, we eat all this processed food, and as a country, we tend to, we have higher and higher numbers of diabetes and obesity and all of this, and I mean that all contributes. And I think as those problems continue to worsen, I think that obviously affects everybody in terms of how they feel and their emotional well-being and all of that. So I suspect that people are becoming more aware and more open about these things, but I think the problems are probably also getting worse. And that's why that makes it that much more important for people to read things, for example, that are helpful to them, like your book, The Anxiety Fix. And someone who reads your book, what will they get from it? Like, do you lay out in the book kind of a plan or a strategy for people to use to deal with their anxiety, or do you make a lot of suggestions about different methods to try to cope, or tell us a little bit more about the book? What do you present to the reader in terms of what can help them?
For sure. So I would say number one is that I think that two things about the book. One is that it should be on it. I mean, you can read it on your own.
Yeah.
However, I really suggest that anyone that considers purchasing Anxiety Fix, that they actually use it alongside their therapist, because really there's things there. For example, I had someone that was reading the book, and then they were like, oh, I saw the coping skills, and so I just figured I could just do them all. No, you cannot. You don't do them all. You don't do them all at one time. The way that I suggest is certainly choosing one or two coping skills, practicing those intentionally over a couple of weeks, seeing, which one is benefiting you most.
Sure.
And if one of them is benefiting, one you don't see the benefit, then drop that second one, add another one. Now you're doing that one that works, and you're trying another one, and on top of that. So definitely, the book presents with a lot of coping skills, support, and I think that is important. That you don't employ 40 coping skills all at one time. I think that will lead to overwhelm. And so the goal is not to overwhelm, but you definitely want to, I would say, use this with your therapist. So that way, the therapist has the book, Anxiety Fix. You have the book, Anxiety Fix. And then you get to read the first chapter. You're answering questions and, figuring out who you are and what's happening with you and why it's happening. And then you get to bring that back to your therapist and kind of talk about, the questions that you answered, why you answered them that way, and your behaviors and your choices that might be leading to your anxiety, right? So this is certainly a book that can be read on an individual basis, but I certainly suggest that you do go through it, on an individual basis. But then when you go to your therapist, hey, I read the first chapter of Anxiety Fix this week. Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
Because I'm certain that your therapist will be very glad to kind of go through the process with you step by step, because it's going to lighten their load as well.
Sure.
And then you've already done some of the work, right? So they don't even have to assign some homework. Hey, you've got your homework right there in Anxiety Fix, and then the therapist is just supporting and facilitating, and it's like, hey, this is really easy.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Is this your first book, by the way, or have you written other books?
I've written other books. However, out of all the books, I will say that this is the best of all the books.
Okay.
So if anyone buys any books that Shana Trahan has written, Anxiety Fix is the one. I mean, this is like the one for, you can buy it for your sister or your brother because you know that they're struggling.
Sure.
And just leave it with them and walk away. Hey, try this. Sometimes people don't want to have the conversation. Here you go. And then just leave them with it, right? Certainly yourself, your kids. It could be a family book to read. Yeah. Let's sit in a circle. Let's talk about this stuff, man. This has been affecting everybody. Little Johnny, it's affecting you at school. You went to a new school. We just moved. We're having some anxiety because now you have to start over from scratch, making new friends. Husband or wife just got a new gig because they just moved. Everybody's feeling the anxiety. Mm-hmm. Let's sit down as a family. Let's read it. Let's talk about it. Let's experience everything together. Hey, we're going to try some of these coping skills together. Hey, we're going to try some new eating plans together, right? So don't just let, your family members sit in a room with the blinds closed and the doors closed and not talking. Let's everybody come together, sit together around Anxiety Fix. We can have some popcorn, take turns reading, and then discuss how we're feeling and what our experience has been.
Yeah, that sounds great, and I'm sure that probably everyone can get something out of it. Even people who think, no, I'm good. I've got this. Everything's good. There's probably going to be something in there that they can glean from it that will help themselves, or perhaps to help someone they know, because these problems are so widespread, and anxiety is such a thing, such a common thing. Obviously, a little bit of anxiety. Tell me if I try to tell people this, but I'm never sure I'm explaining it right. Tell me if you think, Shana, if you think I've got this right. A little bit of anxiety is a good thing, right? Because you have to have some level of anxiety and stress in order to push you to do things, right? To get you to make sure that you take care of your responsibilities. If you have bills to pay, for example, you want to have a little bit of anxiety, like, okay, I've got to pay that bill. I got to make sure I do this on time. I've got to, if you're a parent, I gotta make sure I do this for my kid. I gotta, so a little bit of that's a good thing, right? But you don't want it to become too much where you're worrying about things that you can't control, and now you have anxiety about things that, to a level where it's actually harming you and not helping you, because a little bit is helpful. We human beings, our brains are designed to want to handle some level of challenge, right? Otherwise we'd be bored to death if everything was easy. But we don't. But when that anxiety begins to take us over, and ruin our lives effectively.
Right.
That's when we need to really look at some ways to manage it.
I agree with you 1,000%. Definitely there's what I call good anxiety and bad anxiety, right?
Yeah.
And so, the bad anxiety is anxiety that has you up at night and you can't fall asleep, or if you fall asleep, then you keep waking up. That's bad anxiety. Good anxiety is, oh, I better get up and go take my jog this morning. Let me get up and get my stuff on. That's good anxiety, right? So certainly the things you mentioned, good anxiety. So there is, in my opinion, is good and bad anxiety, right? So we all do live with some level of anxiety, and that's certainly how we, let me go out and water the plants today. I got to do this. Let me make sure this happens. Let me make my list of 5 things I got to do today, right? So those things are good anxiety for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Shana, the time goes quickly. We need to start to wrap up, but I'm so glad to get to talk to you this morning. And the book, The Anxiety Fix, I think it's great, everything that you're doing. Please tell our listeners, where's the best place to go online, not only to get the book, but to learn more about you? Maybe we have someone who wants to talk to you. Maybe they want to schedule something with you. What are the best ways for people to reach you?
Sure. The name of the book is Anxiety Fix, and you can find it on Amazon. And just look up Shana Trahan, ShanaTrahan, and then, of course, our website where you can find more information, definitely about holistic supports and things like that, and the things that we offer is going to be www, if they still allow us to use that, right, Trahan, Trahan, therapy, Therapy, Houston.com. So that's TrahanTherapyHouston.com. And again, we are in 8 states on the East Coast, and I think Idaho, South Carolina, New Mexico, Texas, Louisiana, Delaware, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire. So just reach out to us. We're there.
Outstanding. All right, Shana Trahan, thank you so much. We'll have to do this again in the future. It's been wonderful to speak with you this morning, and I really appreciate you joining us. And it's been great to learn about you and learn about the book. And you're doing great things out there in the world. So, and we need that. So thank you so much for joining us today.
I appreciate you. Thank you for your time. Many blessings, and we will talk soon.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Shana. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
You too.
All right, Shana Trahan, check out her book, The Anxiety Fix, available where, she mentioned Amazon, of course. That's probably, I assume Amazon is the number one place where people get their books. But wonderful to speak with her. And, we focus a lot, obviously, on the show. We do more interviews with musicians than anybody else, but it's wonderful to get into some of these other areas, especially where, partly too, I'm a certified hypnotherapist, so I have a natural interest in these things anyway, and I help people with things like anxiety and stress and whatnot. But I think it's great to bring on other people to talk about these things too. And definitely check out. She's had an amazing career. We could probably have, if we'd had more time, we could have delved more into some of her experiences. But check out her book, Shana Trahan, The Anxiety Fix.